welcome to Movie of the Year, the only podcast with the science and the screaming to determine the best movie for any given year. This season we have been doing 1991, and we had to just take a little bit of time out from the hustle and the bustle to talk about a non-bracket movie. Now, this is embarrassing. I always do this. Is it JFK or GIFK? How do we...
The owner, the inventor of JFK, says
GIFK?
that he pronounces it GIFK.
Mr. Olivier Stone.
And I understand that, but it's not giraffe. You know what I'm saying?
Have we asked Dr. Giraffe, the inventor of the giraffe, whether or not that is how you're supposed to say it?
And what the fuck was that guy on when he invented that thing?
Okay, you know horses,
that's a monster.
right? I'm going to take the one part of horses we all think is way too short, the neck, and I'm just going to go crazy with that, and then for some reason, I'm throwing antennas on that bad boy.
Little alien.
Yes.
But I don't want it to look like a freak, so what I'm going to do is stretch out those legs so it looks like it could fall at any time. The hooves are just points.
Also, a tongue. The same tongue that, like, a cartoon male would have if a hot chick walked by.
Mm-hmm. But jet black.
Tongue.
Jet black like my heart.
And then just absolutely obsessed with selling children of the nation the finest toys possible.
And I don't know this to be true, but we're dealing with JFK today, so you can sort of say whatever you want. 3 vaginas.
Yeah.
On every giraffe, male or female.
Let me ask you, do you know that not to be true, Ryan?
I don't.
That's what the antennae are for.
I'm just asking questions. Maybe we know things about this. Maybe we don't. Well, JFK is the movie of the day, and let me ask you two gentlemen, Ryan and Mike, my best friends, competing not for literal points, but still really wanting, I think, to impress me.
These bonus shows where we don't compete for points while discussing a movie are worthless, pointless bullshit.
You don't feel like you're laying in some groundwork and maybe establishing a little bit of like goodwill?
I think of it as preheating the Greg oven.
Yeah.
Where I'm going to say some complimentary things or smart things today, and he's just going to, next week, think of me fondly. And he doesn't even know why.
If that's the case, I'm going to pull out every single compliment I say, put it on the drop board, on the drop pad, and then just repeat them there.
I am a 1980s automobile. You got to warm me up. You know, you got to, 10 minutes before you're leaving, you got to run out. You got to fire up the engine before you head out on the old Greg Mobile. And so, yeah, you could potentially build up a little bit of goodwill for the next round. Do you have a goodwill already for the movie JFK, gentlemen? Did you watch this when you were 10 and 6 years old?
My kind of goodwill is that about 20 minutes in, I was like, wait, Kevin Costner's not JFK? And then I was like, I thought I'd seen this. And I was like, oh no, that's 13 Days. And I looked that up and went, wait, Kevin Costner wasn't JFK?
He's always just thinking about JFK in every movie he's in.
That guy's obsessed with fucking JFK.
In Bull Durham. Again, not JFK.
Not JFK?
Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Maybe
might be.
JFK. Hard to tell. Ryan, do you have any history, or is it just like a zeitgeisty, you can't escape the reach of this movie?
I've seen this movie before. And you know, the parts that have been made fun of, I've seen a billion times. Back into the Left primarily. But
Back into the Left.
Does he say back into the left that many times?
Not really.
Yeah.
It's kind of surprising
really.
that it became that crazy of a thing.
It is like 4 or 5 times. I'm afraid what I realized as I turned it off, I saw director's cut, and I was like, oh no. So, in my cut, he did say it like 5 times.
But I do love this movie. I think this is it's on TV halfway through. I'm trapped for the rest of the movie. So that's how I've mostly seen it. I just think it's incredibly watchable. It's the least boring movie this long of all time, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. Movies this long do need to be boring at parts just to justify their length. But I do, as a sort of spectacle, I think that this is an awesome movie.
Yeah, we are going to talk about, movie or spectacle is an interesting question I want to get to, but we've done it, gentlemen. We've gotten dangerously close to talking about the actual movie. So what I'm going to do is put the brakes on that, stop it right here, and then come back after a short break. In many ways, 1991 gave us our most normal, run-of-the-mill, movie-ass movies. Well, I'm here to say thank gosh for the bonus shows, because here we are with JFK. half weird YouTube video essay, half historian's fever dream, and every bit of 3 freaking hours. Not normal, and certainly not running any mills. JFK invites us to imagine a crazy world where the CIA boops the president on the snoot in front of the heckin' nation and then goes on to epic fail covering it up. By the end, we may be more confused as to what actually happened than we were before, but the one thing we'll not be able to deny is that we are through the looking glass here, people. All the way through. Nevertheless, gentlemen, I ask you this. Does the movie ever let itself just be a movie? Or is it too distracted with trying to convince the audience of the conspiracy?
I think there are moments. Kevin Costner, his Michael Rooker, and Kevin Bacon just talking. I was like, oh, we're in a movie right now. So everyone's like, this is a sketch show. This is a dramatic sketch show movie, is how I've decided it is. Every scene.
Why do sketches always have to be funny, guys? Let's have some drama sketches.
What if they made you paranoid? So sometimes it's just like raw footage that's real, and that's it. Often interrupts anytime it's a movie for too long. Like Ed Asner being like, "Oh, Camelot to smithereens." It's like it's making fun of noir, and you're like, "Oh, this is a movie," and they're like, "But this might have been what really happened." Anytime it's just comfortably a movie and entertaining. It goes, wait. I need you to know that this is really what we think is going on. It interrupts with like news footage and shit. And you're like, oh man, I was just enjoying a movie. Fuck you, Oliver Stone.
Did you guys find Ed Asner's character boring because he did not have a cartoon rabbit sidekick with him?
Yes. Well, he would have beat that over the head, so I don't want to see that.
Oh, yeah.
Don't you touch my files.
Watching him beat Jack Lemmon was rough. Yeah, and then there's a lot of stuff with Garrison's home life, which it turns out was actually much, much worse than this movie showed.
Right.
But to show how obsessive something like this can make you, it does go home and to his wife, Sissy Spacek, who, damn,
Poor Sissy Spacek.
looking good in this movie. I don't know if I've ever said that about Sissy Spacek before, but and he's basically given up on being a father.
Yeah.
She's like, Jim, it's Easter Sunday, and he's like, I don't care.
He
and then
screams at her,
flips her off,
daring to say he should raise his kids.
Because no matter what happens, his part of the dialogue is just a continuation of the same essay about Jake. There's a part where he wakes up and he's like, honey, and she's like, whoa, and he's like, I just remembered. And then he goes off like into 3 paragraphs of like why it doesn't make sense that there only would have been one shooter. And she's just like, wait, why'd you wake me up? And then he just doesn't even answer. He just keeps saying. Like,
what I love is finally I've seen myself on screen, because that's what I do is when I remember a dinosaur fact, I just wake my wife up and tell her. And then she's just like, what? And I'm like, no, in the Cambrian period before dinosaurs, salamanders were the size of school buses. And then she just
honey,
rolls.
wake up. Dinosaurs had feathers. Wake up.
It reminds me, there was an old bit on TV Funhouse called like Fun with Audio, and they would take like an interview with Tom Snyder and a guest, and Tom Snyder was the kind of host who his guest did not speak, and so they would take that interview and then they would animate it, and it would just be the guest following Tom Snyder around his normal life, like just like making dinner and driving home, and but like the audio, the interview never changes. He just blandly, monotonously just drives through whatever fucking story he's telling. Or like, what's the Duncan Trussell cartoon from a couple years ago?
Midnight Gospel.
Midnight Gospel. It's the same thing. It's just all of this like alien battle is going on as we're just having this philosophical conversation. That's Jim Garrison in this movie.
Oh man, the conversations in that show were so interesting that I find I don't even like pay attention to what's going on the screen or how it came to be happening.
I wish Greg knew about podcasts.
Yeah, he'll learn someday.
I listen to many news podcasts, but there's also a very unusual style to this movie where it almost feels like, or I wonder if there's almost an intention of like, a lot of the scenes feel like purposely recreations, like to remind you that they're very heavily staged scenes. Is that like a point in the movie's favor or a point against the movie?
I think it's fascinating. Like, this is just because you're not allowed to do what this movie does. You could make the argument, I will not, but you could make the argument that the court case at the end is almost tacked on, so there's some amount of third act involved. Because if it wasn't for that court case against Clay Shaw, he would have gone on. Oliver Stone would have gone on forever. Like, this would have been a 24-hour movie of just Garrison wandering around. That
talking like to everybody he meets and just continuing the same conversation.
Yeah. But I still think that that lack of structure is part of what makes it so fascinating, that it does work, because I think the whole thing just works.
It's so interesting to have. There's the All the President's Men vibe in this movie, right? Or 3 Days of the Condor, but it has just sprinkles of like, is Garrison crazy? Like, as the viewer, you don't know that sometimes because you're totally on his side, and every once in a while, somebody who hasn't been in his life hears what he's saying, and you're just like, oh, I think my face should be their face right now.
But because we were there from the beginning of the movie, it's not,
Right.
But the thing is too is that Oliver Stone, in all of the ways that he is telling his very own story and nobody else's, has sort of elected to make Garrison this superhero. That
Right.
I did some reading this morning about Jim Garrison. Not the coolest guy with the coolest life.
The movie hints very heavily at, like, for instance, one thing that the movie kind of says by omission is that, like, he really hated the fact that Clay Shaw was gay, didn't he? Like, he really persecuted this guy because he was a homosexual, didn't he? The movie kind of hints that they're like, and he's not just doing this because Clay Shaw is gay, but something about the way it's said is like, wait a minute, no, the opposite of that must be true. And that's who's going to get hung out to dry for this, is that we found a gay guy, and now we're going to be like, he was... Because even in his own formation, Clay Shaw is kind of just one of 1,800 people who are involved in what happened, right?
Right, yeah, it does feel like Garrison very much like looked at the cast of characters they found and went, I think we could take this one down. And a huge part of that reasoning has to be like, because he's gay.
Well, I mean, I remember a lot of the controversy about the movie, just maybe not when it first came out, because it was all about like truth and fact and all that, but was like, nobody had ever put like this like gay underground under the microscope like Stone did. Like that, it felt like he was adding that more than anybody had ever. And was it just to put something new? Like, if that's the stamp you want to put on the story, why was it that one?
Well, it's great that you bring up truth, Ryan. Let's take a short break here and get into truth, because I think we are knocking on the door of question number 2 here.
Through the looking door?
Through the looking door, gentlemen. Well, that is very, very funny. Or very sad. And perhaps now you have something to think about. Or very problematic, and perhaps we have something to think about. But in any event, I'm sure you have some reaction to what you're listening to. So why not check us out on the social media? You can go to Instagram or Twitter and find us at YourPopFilter. Email contacts@YourPopFilter. Hey, everybody. Keep watching them movies. Let's get to the age-old question of a filmmaker's responsibility for truth. Does Oliver Stone betray any responsibilities here? And has this question or answer changed in light of what Facebook and other websites have done to our parents and or grandparents?
I want to say that all he owes us is an entertaining 3.5 hours, if that's what he's decided to make. But I do think because the movie keeps interrupting itself to be like, nah, this is the real stuff. Even though Oliver Stone said, this is my counter myth to the Warren Commission's agreed upon myth. But that's not in the movie. The movie plays it dead serious and is like, no, this is actually what happened. So it gets fuzzy, and it's the holidays, so I'm around family, and I keep talking about documentaries, and they keep bringing up biopics, and I was like, no, because you're like, oh, so-and-so played Nikki Sixx in The Dirt. I was like, no, I thought we were talking about a Motley Crue documentary, and they're like, yeah. So I did, that makes me like, maybe we need to realize some audiences are dumb, and we need to...
But see, that's the thing. That's where the question comes in, is Oliver Stone's responsibility. I think he fulfilled it, and he just stopped short of saying, I'm doing the same thing that they did.
Right.
My main point is that I'm fabricating, or this is like what I did. But I'm a filmmaker. Like that's my fucking job.
He's an artiste.
The government did the same thing, but then there's these very stupid people.
I was gonna say, I think what makes that hard argument is like the first 20-25 minutes are just real footage of the Kennedys. It's like, if you didn't know who JFK was, here's like the lowdown. It's like Get Back, the Beatles documentary. If you don't know who the Beatles are, but for some reason you turn this on, here's in 20 minutes or less their whole career before this movie starts. And because of that, lets you slip in that, like, then this is all real. And I guess it's Wizard of Ozian, and it's like, yeah, we walked through the looking glass, we have our ruby slippers on the yellow brick road, and so now I can pretend this is all real.
I mean, starting even before that, though, Mike, is it starts with Dwight D. Eisenhower saying, like,
Right.
I think there might be this thing called the military-industrial complex that's maybe, and I'm trying not to freak out here, going to keep us perpetually in wars and become like an industry that is the tail that wags the dog. I'm leaving right now. Good luck with all this, everybody. Peace.
Shit's fucked up, I'm out.
And then it's like the natural sort of progression of that is, according to this movie, the military-industrial complex removing the president, right? Because that's the big hindrance. Have you ever read the comic book, the graphic novel From Hell?
Yes.
No.
It's about Jack the Ripper, and it's a historical fiction about who Jack the Ripper might have really been and what might have been going on there. But the epilogue is about all the like weird history that's been done about who is potentially Jack the Ripper, and his conclusion in it is to say there's no knowing anymore. Mm-hmm. There's been too much mock history. There's been too much potential history. It's been too much covering up. It's not possible to actually say this is what happened anymore. So I presented a fictionalized version because as a historical event now, it's a nexus where anything is possible.
Yeah, those
many things are probable.
muddy.
David Ferry, Joe Pesci in the movie, says as much when he has his little freak out right before he dies about like he does use the line of it's a puzzle wrapped in a question wrapped in an enigma or whatever, which
is this the
classic,
origin of that?
I doubt it, but I think the origin was somebody describing Elizabeth Taylor.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Okay.
Elizabeth Taylor killed JFK. Is that what you're saying right now, Greg?
Elizabeth Taylor.
I am going to go on record. Here's what I'll do. I will say that I think that she is part of the broader conspiracy. Because that's what I feel like this movie did after a while, is it just glommed onto any group of people, and it didn't say they did it, it said that they were maybe involved. And every once in a while it'd be like, wait, you think this because one person sought you out and invited you to sit down, and they just said every crazy thing that occurred to them while they worked in some office, and then you're like, okay, this must be part of the conspiracy. One of my questions is, at the end, does this all hang together into one conspiracy, or is it a big baggy monster?
I don't think it does. Like that's the important part of why David what David Ferry said was
yes.
We don't know, we'll never know, the shooters don't even
That's the important part. Who killed Kennedy? The shooters don't even fucking know. Like
yeah. And so, and I think that's why he lost. Like, there's a juror, I think, that is getting interviewed after the court case, and they're like, okay, so the Warren Commission's bullshit.
Yeah.
But we have nothing to hang Clay Shaw or Clay Bertrand on,
right.
you know? And that's the thing, is that Garrison stops in the court case, stops talking about Clay Bertrand about halfway through that segment, and he's just like, but JFK's crazy, right? Like, isn't this all crazy?
And that's what's so smart about the movie, is because you're like, but we saw things the jurors don't know. No, we saw the depiction of somebody telling a story. And
that's why I think it's so pointedly, like, kind of, so much of the acting is kind of like pointedly a little phony to remind you, this is not like a historical record you're seeing. It's a movie-ass movie.
What would have been awesome is if Costner said nobody has ever seen this footage before, but instead of pulling out the Zapruder film, there's like a Spaceballs moment where he showed JFK up to that point.
They're just looking back. But I think that's why you get a murderer's row, so you get them acting normal as Joe Pesci can act, right? Dave Ferry in his interviews and in the scenes that are in color versus the Dave Ferry that shows up in people's black and white recollection, he's suddenly becoming the cartoon of Joe Pesci, like the Good Feathers from Animaniacs parody of Joe Pesci, because they're elevated.
Garrison sits in his chair and looks out his window and just starts spinning, you know? And this is now Joe Pesci. That
actually makes me think the movie was smart, because when they showed Pesci and Tommy Lee Jones and Kevin Bacon, and they were doing homosexual stuff, and they're all like dressed like Egyptians and nipple biting, and I was just like, okay, movie, but it makes so much more sense being like, no. All they said is we were partying, and now this is what Jim Garrison is assuming that means for four gay dudes to party.
What do you think they do anyway?
All I could think is that they were at a party, and they were like, and then to like the jump to get them in those costumes, they're like, all right, guys, we're all hanging out right now. Let's go in separate rooms and get ready for 4 hours in these costumes just to come back and party some more. That's not going to work.
I do think that regardless of whether or not it hangs into one narrative, wouldn't you say it's very hard to not believe that the CIA had something to do with this? Like, the movie does make its individual points, I think, very effectively. Whether or not you need to go and track down their sources and find out if they're true or not, it's hard to watch the movie's depiction of all the different places Lee Harvey Oswald lived and all the different things he did and not be like, okay, this guy clearly was working for the CIA. Like, there's no doubt about that part of it, right?
The story is not just that it was a lone gunman, but also it was just some fucking hillbilly who like got a spur in his butt to kill the president, right? Like,
yeah, I guess like kind of like a communist that was upset with, or Marxist-Leninist, but I think in the popular conception, it was just some crazy communist who got fired up about the Bay of Pigs and then shot Kennedy, and then he in turn was shot by someone who was so into the Kennedys that he was like, I don't want Mrs. Kennedy to have to go through this. And so he killed the killer. It's on face value. It's so absurd and like obvious that I think all of this stuff has sprung up around it to try to occlude the fact that it's like, okay, obviously something really weird happened here. Like this story does not make sense at all that we've been given by the Warren Commission.
It's fun knowing. So I'm 35. I'm about to get handed my big stack of World War II books, and that's what I'm getting into. Nope, that's gone, man. I am now going to get heavily into JFK and figure out what's going on. This is my old man hobby.
But see, that's the thing, Mike. Like, really, what you will find is that none of it hangs together, and much of it is actually like so much of it is CIA planted disinfo. Not to sound even crazier than the conspiracy theorists, just to cover up the fact that some of it is real. There's all this different stuff that the CIA probably planted themselves, you know, to cover up the truth. Well, I'm glad we got to the bottom of that. I feel like we really were able to get in deep and separate the wheat from the chaff. When we come back, we are going to get to our third question already, and it's about a very special actor, Mr. Kevin Costner.
Hey guys, thank you so much for listening so far, and let me just tell you that everything ahead of this commercial is much better than what came before it. That's my guarantee. While I have you here, let me tell you about a website. It's called yourpopfilter.com, and it's everything you need that's related to Pop Filter. Everything Mike, everything Ryan, everything Greg, everything Cassie, everything is there at yourpopfilter.com. While you're there, go to yourpopfilter.com/Amazon. Make that your new Amazon bookmark and do your shopping from there. That way, we get a little piece of the action and Amazon doesn't. Make sure you're also listening to everything that Pop Filter has to offer, which includes the Superhero Show, a podcast that covers every single TV show that's based on a comic book or comic book property, and Movie of the Year, where we sit down and try and figure out what is the single greatest movie of any given year. That's Superhero Show, that's Movie of the Year, and that's yourpopfilter.com. Rate, subscribe, review, bye!
Kevin freaking Costner. Is this sole film enough proof that Kevin Costner is an amazing actor that belongs in the pantheon of amazing actors? Or is he just elevated by a cast of ringers?
I think he's great, and I've loved him my whole life. He was the Prince of Thieves, after all. But
in this same year, right? So, like, he was doing double duty here, folks.
And maybe a couple of days on the set, switch the accents accidentally. But this may be a good time to go over the differences between actor and star.
Okay.
I think that he is an incredible star. He's very handsome and he's charming, and despite his voice that can really drone, I think that he's immensely watchable. And I think that, you know, Stone had a lot of quotes because there's a million people up for this role. And Stone talked a lot about how he was the most all-American guy that you have to root for no matter what.
That for sure. There's so many times in hindsight thinking about the movie, you're like, oh, he was a little wonky there or being an asshole there. But while you're watching him, you're only pro Costner's Garrison. It's because...
God damn it, Kevin, I love you.
And I think this is the best acting. I also find him charismatic, was raised on Prince of Thieves, but I think this is best acting from him because, like Greg, you said at the beginning that this is just basically a 3-hour essay, and most of that is delivered by him. But he's saying it with passion. He's not stumbling over the written to death lines. He's saying it like they're off the top of his head. He's almost near to tears at times in the courtroom when he's like angry and they found all the bugs. He's like, I'm coming to Washington. So many other people would overplay any of those emotions, but because he is Costner middle of the roading it all plays real and grounded and pretty compelling.
Apparently, he kept turning down the role because he told his wife that he was going to take a break from acting. He had already made a movie that year.
Yeah.
But then read the script and sent it to her, and she was like, no, you have to do this movie, which is probably bullshit. Stuff like that never happens. But Kevin Costner was at least passionate about this movie to make that story up and tell people that it happened.
She's
So
probably
many of
closer
those-
to Sissy Spacek.
As I have done this podcast more and more and done more and more research, so many of the stories told around the making of movies are obviously just bullshit. The most common one that is like that is every time I've ever done trivia for a movie that contains a nude scene with a woman, there's always a fun fact that's like, actually there wasn't even supposed to be a nude scene here, but she wanted to do it so bad. She said it's necessary to the part. She just popped her top and then we just went on filming. And every single time, I'm like, that is such bullshit.
No.
My wife demanded that I make this movie. She said, Kev, that's what she calls me, I will leave you if you do not make the JFK movie. And so I said, honey, that's what I call her. I am more than willing to do it. So I think he is definitely doing the brand of acting in this that everyone is doing, right? He's going for that sort of over the top, like almost, he's like, I think we remember this movie as being one long court case because even though only like 25% of it is a long court case, he is giving his opening statement to anybody who will listen from the beginning to the
He's
end.
Forrest Gump in it.
And I kept going back and forth between being like, this is too much like an essay, this is too much like an opening argument, to being like, no, but I bet this guy really was like that.
I know the movie shows there's a lot of reasons Michael Rooker and the other guy like quit and leave for various amounts of time. But part of it seems like, yeah, if your boss is always just lecturing instead of listening to the reporting you're bringing him, you would also be like, I'm done.
Did you
That
ever
other
feel-
actor's name, the guy that's not Michael Rooker, his name is J.O. Sanders, and it's middle initial O. And that, you shouldn't be allowed to do that. Like, because now you sound Irish. And you're
J.O.
tricking people.
Sanders. David O. Russell.
Did you ever feel like in this movie that when another character would talk, it's because Oliver Stone was sitting there and he was like, shit, there's other people in this scene. And then when they would pick up, they almost sounded exactly like Garrison themselves.
Yeah.
He
He also perfected there's a lot of pipe in the mouth, but also a lot of glasses in the mouth. Like, there's a lot of Garrison just pondering while somebody's listening, or while somebody else is talking. But he's not listening.
No,
he's thinking of his next thing to say.
He's writing his sentences before he says them.
Do you think that this same sort of all-American charm that Kevin Costner used to rise to stardom in 91, that now it's working against him because we no longer see the sort of like, aw shucks, American innocence as like something laudable anymore?
It feels naive, it feels dumb.
He's on the biggest show in the history of men
yeah.
60 years or older. Like, he still has it, and there's still a population that wants it. You know, us kids who grew up on him are a little more jaded now, but the people who were adults when he came are like, they still want that Costner back.
Do you know how many old relatives have told me on this trip that I need to watch Yellowstone?
That's what visiting family is. It's just not everyone becomes Jim Garrison, but about Yellowstone.
Did this happen gradually or all of a sudden? I feel like I had I had heard that Yellowstone existed both as a national park and as a show, and then kind of radio silence. And now I am aware that there is a prequel and that everybody in the world knows what's going on with the show Yellowstone. What?
Oh, it's gone like full Walking Dead. Like, we're gonna get 3 or 4 iterations of this show. I think what happened is
the Yellowstone
that when it first started, because I think this is like season 4. It's been on for a while.
Yeah, I think like 5 or even maybe.
That
6.
The old dudes that we're talking about, they told each other about it, like there was strong word of mouth, but just not in our bubble. Like,
yeah,
we wouldn't hear
Very
about that
different
shit because we're not doing conservative memes on Facebook every morning.
And
I feel like without even watching it, I should tell my dad he should watch it.
Oh yeah, if he wants to like fit in at his
old man
lunch
parties,
place, yeah.
Which is so weird because he weirdly does, even though he's never been like a macho man himself. He's always been into them, so he'll like to be able to talk to the guys at the gym about the cool hetero stuff they're all into.
I I think the new Kevin Costner, for good or ill, is like Ryan Reynolds, because he's also, so All American doesn't mean anything anymore, but he's always kind of just himself, but he's at, what Kevin Costner injects, like light gravitas and the aw shucks, and Ryan Reynolds injects the isn't everything stupid? What I'm doing right now, isn't that stupid?
Including me, aren't I stupid?
Yes, and then that's what the younger generation is like, yes, everything is stupid. It's dumb nihilism, is what Ryan Reynolds gives us.
I felt like my heart sank when you said that Ryan Reynolds was our modern Kevin Costner, and I'm not sure why I had that like visceral reaction. It felt like in Greek mythology, how people are just getting worse and worse and worse, and like this is the age of just bronze. We have fallen so far that our Kevin Costners are Ryan Reynolds. Well, this movie probably won some awards, maybe won some awards. I don't know. But when we come back from this break, it will win many awards. We all dream of receiving them. Well, that's not a dream for JFK. JFK did it and actually received awards. It was nominated for Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Director, Best Writing, Screenplay, Best Sound, Best Music, and won for Best Cinematography and Best Film Editing. That feels kind of cheap. It feels like they kind of jammed them with two of the lessies as a way of saying, like, we see your movie. We like what you did there.
Plus, but I mean, like, this movie is all those two things, you know? Like,
yeah, that's true.
If you could almost say most editing.
Yes. This won for most editing in any movie ever.
Well, we're going to give it some awards. Let's start with surprising cameo. What wins the award for surprising cameo, Mike?
There were so
now cameo.
many.
This is like a small brooch with a picture in it.
Yes, and I was surprised to see that everybody was wearing one. And maybe this is bigger than a cameo, but I think I was surprised so many times, like this person too, and this person.
Yes.
But I'm going to give it to Laurie Metcalf, because it took me so long into her scenes to realize that this is Aunt Jackie from Roseanne. And because she's not funny, she's not wacky, she's just delivering a solid, dope, dramatic, I own the room performance. And she crushed it. And everybody else around then was in movies all the time. And as a kid, I only knew her from Roseanne and then later Scream 3. So, I'm sorry, Scream 2. So yeah, I'm giving it to Laurie Metcalf.
Could have been funnier, though. You said it yourself. Could have been funnier.
Yeah, I could have used a pratfall or two.
Ryan, what do you think?
I got to go John Candy.
Yeah, dude, the Candyman was in this movie. Come on, Daddy-O's.
And I don't think we've ever done a movie of the year with him in it. He just wasn't in, he was movies. In beloved movies, but maybe not movie of the year movies. So it was awesome. And although he was playing kind of a dickbag, I read that sweat was not like added. He said that he was so nervous about being in an Oliver Stone movie with actual actors that he was just so nervous that he was sweating the entire time. And it's like, Candyman, you got to be fucking sweet and adorable, even on JFK.
Yeah, it really worked with him just like fanning himself in the South.
and his dialogue is so interesting. Yeah, it was great to see him. I'm definitely there are no winners on this one because it's not technically a game show, but Ryan, if there had been winners, you definitely would have won that for Candyman, which I now have said 3 times. So I'm right up against the limit here.
Uncle Buck's going to show up.
Now, we might go back to back on this one because, Ryan, who do you think wins the award for best accent in this movie?
I did think about the Daddy-O himself.
Yeah.
And if it was best sunglasses, for sure.
Yeah.
But we see Tommy Lee Jones. He's a great actor, but he doesn't change his voice that much. And I thought here, not flamboyant, but definitely Southern. And he reminded me so much of Bill Dauterive's family from New Orleans, and how Bobby Hill just sinks right into it.
That is one of the best episodes of King of the Hill. Like, that is such a good Bobby episode. This summer flower is wilted.
There's one point where Tommy Lee Jones is getting grilled by Kevin Costner, and he stands up and he's like, "May I go? I'm gonna go home and make myself some etouffee." And I was like, "Oh, you got it, dude. You got it right there." Don't know what the fuck etouffee is, but you're gonna go eat it.
There's one scene where Tommy Lee Jones gets the vapors, recovers, and then instantly gets the vapors again. A real double vapor situation. Mike, what do you say? Who has the best accent in this movie?
I think there are a lot of successful attempts and unsuccessful attempts at accents in this movie. I think the person who's the most consistent is Kevin Bacon. And maybe it's because he only has a couple scenes where he has to, but there was no shakiness. He just delivered his southern accent, and it worked. And I'm going to say he's just a real working class accent doer. He's not trying to etouffee his way into anything fancy.
Kevin Bacon's character is one of my picks for guy who, when you hear him talking, you're like, this all makes sense. But when you take a step back, you're like, okay, wait. So here's this prostitute who's in prison who calls this guy and is like, I'm going to tell you how the world really works.
Well, what I would say to Greg is that you don't know shit because you haven't been fucked in the ass. So of course you don't really believe him.
That is very interesting life advice.
Plus, Kevin Costner at the beginning of the movie, he's like, I don't understand how being a prostitute makes you go blind. Because they're always like discounted as witnesses, but all of them are in the court case. Every single one is like, he did heroin, doesn't know what's up.
Right.
Yeah.
This movie reminded me, as of this recording, I'm trying to catch up on the end of the year stuff, including watching Mayor of Easttown, which is such a just barrage of Pennsylvanian accents. Everyone, everyone's just thick. Everyone's doing it as hard as they can, but no two accents are similar.
That's PA, baby.
And that's my wife and I have only talked like that for the last week.
Can you give us a little sampling?
Just like, don't go home, because it's a lot of Lorne Michaels. Like,
don't
go home until we get the water.
You sound like Dr. Evil.
$1 billion.
$1 million
for the water race.
All right, so I am going to give that to Kevin Bacon. And a quick apology to sex workers and our imprisoned population. You're as trustable as anybody else. Why did I profane your name like that? Well, that leads us directly to cringe. What did this movie wins for cringe, Mike?
It so often the things it's showing when you cringe, it wants you to cringe. So there's a quick flash,
like when the president's head goes booby bam.
Yeah, that wants you to cringe at that, or when people are saying things like. When there's like light homophobia, I think the movie is not on the side of the homophobes.
A lot of times there's light homophobia, which is just setting up the bigger homophobia.
And it's the homophobia you made along the way, I think is the point of it. So there's a flash of, we get a Mardi Gras parade, and there's just like a float of people in blackface, and then we move on. I was like, why did I just see that? Why did I have to see that first? Come on, movie. So that's mine.
That's pretty cringy. Ryan, can you do better than that?
Yeah, Garrison's closing speech. And we're so close, Oliver Stone, we're so close to the end of the movie. And then his very last thing is Kevin Costner looks into the fucking camera and says, and it's up to you.
Yes. Yeah.
And I thought about that. I think it's in Who Shot Mr. Burns, where
yes. Can you
solve the crime? And then the camera,
I don't know, I'll try.
Cuts to Wiggum, and it's like, I mean, it is my job.
Give my best shot, I guess.
So yeah, we should have spun around, and the jury was like, okay, Mr. Garrison, sure. But no, he was talking to us. It's up to us to figure out who killed JFK.
Not guilty. There's been one movie to ever do looking right down the camera well, and that is Tokyo Story. If your movie's not Tokyo Story, hey, guess what? Just throw out that shot. It's hard to do. And certainly don't have somebody talk to the audience literally through the camera. I'm going to give it to that. That's a bigger cringe than blackface. I'm going on the record. How about director's signature? Mike, do you want to try to use blackface again for that one?
No, is he known for that? Because that's horrible. Even in Alexander Stone? Come on. I'm going to give it to... We watched a 3.5-hour movie, and it was dubiously truthful, which I know he's known for. But he was like, the movie didn't do enough. Now I just got to give you Star Wars paragraphs at the end to let you know what kept going. And that feels very Oliver Stone. I don't know if it actually is, but emotionally it feels very Oliver Stone of like, I'm not done. Wait. Don't leave the theater yet.
We gave you 3 hours. There was hardly any drama. It was just characters talking about what their whole deal was. And yet you still had to, at the end, be like, all right, wait, hang on. Just read this pamphlet.
At least it was,
Ryan, what do you think?
At least it was true, though, as opposed to Boys in the Hood, remember? Where it was like, 3 days later, Ice Cube died. My director's signature, towards I would say in the first hour of the movie, when things are really flying fast and furious, it cuts to these like camps in Cuba. and it's real footage, but then it's in black and white, but then it's also all of a sudden Oliver Stone and Gary Oldman is there, and he's just standing there, and Joe Pesci is there, and that whole like we're going to strobe out basically editing style. It just has all of Stone's tricks in this scene where the editing is going to be super flashy, and we don't want. It's not about making you think what I think is true. It's about making you second guess everything with the real footage and the fake footage all blurred together. And again, it's not to make you think Gary Oldman was in Cuba at the time. It's just to be this sort of purposefully confused, controlled chaos.
So your contention is that Barry Oldman was not in Cuba at that time?
I can't say that he was or was not.
Because it just looked from the pictures, it honestly looked like
it looked
was.
Like he might have been.
Back in 91, we were not sure what
in 91.
What could and could not be done with computers.
They were just blowing our minds.
You'd see a shot like that, and you'd be like, what the hell?
Well, that's why I like that in one of the long speeches, a random stranger is doing live action Photoshop. And then they explain it, and I was like, I think they put it in there so we would believe that you can do this to photos.
Well, I'm going to give that award to Ryan's pick for the hyper editing, which again, this won the Oscar for editing, so it makes sense. Ryan, who do you think takes down for best pound for pound performance? Are we going back to John Candy?
I wish. This was
I wish.
In the movie enough. I do have to give it to Tommy Lee Jones again. I just thought it was a really restrained performance, and the fucking look on his face the entire time. You know, there's scenes in the movie that we see of Tommy Lee Jones that he doesn't necessarily know we saw. You know, like the way that he is in public versus private is different, but still of the same piece. The smirk, the cockiness, the knowing that I'm going to get away with it, but never like that asshole. And just the voice, the commanding presence. Like, he's tall. The white hair is shocking to look at.
Shockingly white.
That weird curly.
Well, yeah, it's just this weird white fro. But once you get used to that, I think that you can't take your eyes off him.
Do you agree, Mike?
I have to concur. I think there's a point in the courtroom where he's smirking right at Garrison, but the smirk does not hit his eyes. His eyes are actually starting to get a little sweaty. But so the lower half is like, no, I'm gonna get in your head and be like, I'm untouchable. And his eyes are like, oh shit, all the stuff he said is true. It is up to the audience. And yeah, he just never and we've seen Tommy Lee Jones get big in his career, and that in a movie where a lot of people are getting big, he was like, what if I didn't here?
Yeah.
Is this different than him as Two-Face, would you say?
I think they're comparable.
I think he really understood that it could be both things, that you could take the style of the movie and still incorporate a more down-to-earth, realistic performance. And he sort of got the best of both worlds. And I guess he was nominated for Best Actor in a Supporting Role. So congratulations, because he also won our Best Actor in the movie that we were just talking about. Do you guys have recommendations for me?
I think I said it earlier, the 3 Days of the Condor. If you like this, go watch that. It's more paranoia. I kept trying to remind myself that Donald Sutherland and Max von Sydow are different human beings.
Yes,
they play similar vibes in these movies for sure.
Those are very much the same sort of like speeches and characters in the same setting. I definitely got confused about that too.
Wait.
I do want to give Sutherland props though. Like, didn't sort of win my best performance because it is just sitting on a bench, but to be able to pull that sort of scene off where you really are a history professor lecturing for like a solid 12 minutes and still make it that compelling, I think Sutherland gets a lot of credit. But and
his attitude of, isn't the world bullshit, but isn't it all kind of funny?
Yeah.
Like it was a great delivery.
Which was Van Sydow too.
For
sure. Just like Garrison's like testifying. He's like, fuck no. Anyway, bye.
No, come on.
I mean, yeah, they got him transferred as far away from the scene of the crime as they possibly could ahead of time.
Right.
And then he came back after they had made none of the like normal security procedures. Like, the fact that they didn't kill that guy, that's just a temporary condition. If he goes to like testify, he's going to end up like taking his own life or getting in a bad car accident. Mine would be the one of the books this is based on. I read Crossfire, the plot that killed Kennedy. And you very much have the same process reading the book that you do watching the movie, which is about 15 minutes through, you're like, I'm going to figure out who did this. And then halfway through, you're like, all right, it's all coming together. And then you get near the end and you're just like, I'm more confused now than I was before. And you feel like truth is impossible. There's no knowing anything.
Would you say that you'll get caught up in it?
Yeah, dude, you will definitely get caught up in it. It is so. Can we just say, like, I don't know if you want to go through some of your greatest hits of like crazy parts of this conspiracy, but the part where the president gets shot and then the guy driving the car just stops the car.
Yeah,
dude, what? Why would you do that? And the story is like, oh well, I wanted Jackie Onassis to be able to jump off the back. What?
Yeah.
Don't
What?
stop. If someone is shooting at the president, don't stop the car.
Also,
that very much seems like too much to account for.
His first thought was, oh my God, this is an assassination attempt on Jackie Onassis.
Yeah,
Better get
she
her
should
out.
be able to run away.
If what you should have done, we've learned from movies, is if anything happens while you're driving, you close your eyes and you veer wildly. That's what happens.
For sure.
You know, the shooter won't suspect is you just drive right up through that sidewalk for a while.
My recommendation, we already talked about it as well, is Who Framed Roger Rabbit, a different sort of conspiracy that is about how, like, the government just destroyed homes in order to earn money on billboards on freeways. So it's a real thing that happened, guys, just this time with cartoons.
Maybe think about taking it seriously for once, right?
Jerks.
Do you know what was wild? Is how many people got offended that anybody dare criticize the government. That's bananas. I guess there are still people like that, but they seem like cranks now instead of like that's the norm. Just in the courtroom, the other lawyer, random people are like, how dare he say this? It's like, wait, you knew what this case was about, right? Like, this can't be a surprise.
A lot of murmuring.
Well, this is right around the time where trust in the government was like so high that, remember when the story of that U-2 plane going down over Russia? The government said, no, that didn't happen. And then when Russia produced that pilot, I was taught in history class that a lot of people, that was the first time they knew the president had lied.
Whoa.
So how could, like, that's how jejune the nation was at the time. That, like, you really think that's the first time the president ever lied? Was like, no, we don't have spy planes flying over Russia.
And what it seems like, too, since then, is it's a lot of, like, we know that they're liars. We just don't want to hear about it. Like, if you start proving it, then we have to deal with it. And what's better is if we just bitch about it a little bit, but then move on.
Grumble, not specific.
Well, we have bitched about this a little bit, and we are going to move on. When we come back, I'm going to ask you guys, do you think this could have made some noise in the bracket?
Hola, Filterinos. I just wanted to interrupt real briefly and say thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. If you want to support us a little more directly, you can go to patreon.com/yourpopfilter. There, depending on what tier you pick, $1 a month, $5 a month. If you're crazy, anything more than $5 a month, don't do that. You can get extra content. There's extra shows, extra series, behind-the-scenes stuff. You could pay for Ryan to draw you a picture. I can write you a poem. You can get the shirts off our very own backs. All of that and so much more over at patreon.com/yourpopfilter. While you're on the internet, you should check out Shady Monk. He does all the tunes you've been listening to. He's on Bandcamp, he's on Spotify, SoundCloud, wherever kids get their music these days that I'm too old to know. Shady Monk lives there. You can probably follow him on Twitter and Instagram as well. That's Shady Monk. Wherever you get music, check him out.
Well, I don't want to say this was pure raves, but I think for one of our bonus shows, this is about as close to just like singing the praises of a movie as we have had. Does that give either one of you pause at all about the fact that it's not in the main bracket?
Nah. I don't think it could. I don't think it could take the bracket down.
It does it definitely gives me pause. Not so much so that like I would know which movie to kick out necessarily, or like I'm choosing one, but I do think that it was a mistake as far as like how impactful this movie was at the time and continues to be. That, I mean, like this year was a lot about JFK discussion.
Yeah.
1991 was?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean, it's still being, like, memed, and it was referenced in every show for years and years and years since then. I have to say, the one reason I am not sad that it didn't make the bracket is it's a very compelling piece of entertainment, but I still come back to the question at the top of the show, which is, like, this is, like, really expanding the idea of what a movie can be, I think, almost to the breaking point to me. I loved it. It was interesting, but it was so much just like a video essay, and it took pains to sometimes like kind of like side put in some narrative structure. And so I don't think it would have won. I think it maybe could have done some early damage, but I don't think we're missing out on it really.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting mess, but it's still a mess enough that I don't think it would have gone far.
But a lot of fun to watch and a lot of fun to talk about, and certainly helps build out our idea of what 1991 is, because the scenes that have survived this movie are bigger than the movie itself. You know, Back and to the Left being one of them.
It's a lot of fun to talk about, but it's also a lot of fun to listen to people talk about it. Like, people are going to fucking love this episode.
Yeah.
They're going to just cream their pants.
Well, I guess what we'll do, we'll get out ahead of this and we'll just say, you're welcome. You know, you're
Happy
welcome.
holidays. You're welcome.
Yeah, this is our gift to you, and as always, we are the podcast that keeps on giving. But until we have a chance to give you even more, hey, do us each and every one of us a favor, would you? And keep watching them movies.